Kevin Holland is back in the news. I got to tell you, I can't remember the last time I've seen a Kevin Holland headline. And looking back a year ago, I couldn't go to any.com and not see Kevin Holland, right? He was all the rage. Then I had my own experience with Kevin. And my experience, Kevin had just beat, I believe it was Jacare, but it represented either the third or the fourth win that he had had in about as many months. And we had an opening in Submission Underground. It was to take on Rumble Johnson. Now, even if his opponent, I'm talking about Kevin Holland, wasn't just Jacare, right? He fought so many guys. It was still at 185 pounds. That part I have right. Rumble Johnson, anything but 185 pounder. So Kevin was going to be up against it. Oh, by the way, he needed to be on a plane the next morning and the match was 2 days away. This was going to be absolutely no time to prepare. But I'm told call Kevin Holland. When you're in a gym, you call Kevin Holland. So I do. I introduce myself. He accepts the match. The match ended up not coming to fruition. Something happened, but it wasn't on Kevin's end. Kevin accepted the match. He said yes. We're booking his plane tickets when it gets disrupted. But now I'm armed with that information, and I feel as though I owed it to Kevin. I owed it to his mentality. I owed it to his competitiveness to come out and share that story with you guys. And because of that and that one and only interaction, I have now elected myself like chairman of Kevin's committee to make sure that he's prepared and is taking the right fights. So I should fully disclose to you that my own involvement in Kevin's career is no more than what I just said. But I still felt like because he answered that call, I felt because I privately had information that he was willing to get on an airplane and come out to Submission Underground, a rule set of which had yet to be explained to him, and take on the great Anthony Johnson, I felt as though I owed him something. So now as I study Kevin's career, I still am not comfortable with his self-assessments. I'm not comfortable yet. If you were to back up to the night that Kevin fought Brunson, or you were to fast forward to the night that Kevin fought Vettori, it was the same fight in that Kevin did just fine on his feet. It was the in-between. It was the takedown itself, not what happened once they got to the ground. It was the in-between that was the glaring problem for me that needed to be identified. It was the lack of resistance Kevin was offering both Brunson and Vettori. In fact, I would go the other way than resistance, and I would say that Kevin was cooperating with. And Kevin loved and respected the ground so much. He was very proud of his brown belt. He had complete trust in his coach, Travis Luter. He had success from the bottom, see the Jacare fight just by example. But he had so much confidence in that position that I felt as though and it could have even been subconscious. It could have been subconsciously, but there was a cooperation between Kevin Holland and his opponents, both Brunson and Vettori. There was a cooperation to go down to the ground. Now, statistically speaking, you don't finish fights from the bottom. Hard to say to Brunson, considering he had just finished Jacare from the bottom. But in a broad stroke, and it's very important that you do understand the statistics. The Olympic Games just ended. You guys know I'm a wrestling fan. But USA Wrestling, the national governing body, will bring every single match back to Colorado Springs, and they will pay a team to rewatch every single match, but take data. When all of that data is done, USA Wrestling wants to know what was the number one scoring technique on your feet, what was the second most scoring technique on your feet, what was the number one scoring technique from the parterre position, what was the second most scoring technique from the parterre position, to know in a broad stroke form where the sport is at and what direction, both offensively but moreover defensively, our athletes need to work on. Now that just makes good sense, what I said to you. That just makes good sense. I, a number of times, have had to come out and reveal the ineffectiveness of judo into MMA. Without fail, I will then have comments from people saying their Chael is hating on judo. I don't understand what part of that is hateful. I'm coming to you with a statistic that there has been one champion in history, Ronda Rousey, to represent judo. There has never been another champion throughout history, and I could back it up further than that. There's never been a number one contender. As a matter of fact, There's never been a judo practitioner who was even in the elimination match, right? Two guys go out. Whoever wins this fight will go fight for the title. Judo hasn't even been represented in that. So it's not that Chael doesn't like judo. It's that Chael understands and studies the trends and the data. I am a jiu-jitsu black belt. I love jiu-jitsu. I believe in jiu-jitsu. Good guys don't get submitted from a guy on the bottom. Broad stroke statement, but it doesn't happen. It does not happen in the main events, which is where Kevin Holland is fighting. No matter how good you are off your back, you're not going to submit a good fighter from your back. Now, that's a broad stroke. And I'll see the comments where people have to come in and tell me where this has happened, but they're going to have to search to find it. They're going to have to really search and think and go, no, I do remember seeing that. And they could even tell you when, but it was nowhere in recent memory. And that's just not how jiu-jitsu was set up. When Royce Gracie came into the UFC to show the world jiu-jitsu, there was no rounds and there was no time limits, which was a clue. It was an indicator that jiu-jitsu does not do its best work with rounds or time limits, which is why he removed them. Now, I only bring that because I continue to talk about cooperating and being on bottom. And Kevin Holland wanted to go out and learn wrestling. And he even went to AKA and got with Daniel Cormier. Probably could not have put himself in a better situation or with a better mind. I appreciate and I respect it all. But it's twofold. First off, do not cooperate. Make the takedowns very, very difficult. Second, if you end up on bottom, do not in make-believe land think that you're going to get a good guy in a submission hold. You can use submissions to get reactions, to get underhooks, to create scrambles, to get back to your feet. If you're a master of sweeps like, say, Damian Maia, that would also be an option for you. But when I watch Kevin Holland, I'm being very critical of him, but I come critical from a very positive place in my heart and mind. I feel that I'm involved with Kevin now, right? All because he took that call, was willing to take a rumble, but I still feel a connection, and I am right on this. And it has to be a fundamental change mentally. Mentally, I'm going to make them work for takedowns. What does that do? That makes them shoot less takedowns. That makes them know this is hard and not be as willing and eager as to get in and even try the takedown. That's what fighting so hard means. Philosophically, can't be on the bottom. You got to think about it. You got to convince yourself the mat is hot. I spent no time on the bottom, ever. But I had convinced myself the mat was hot. It was lava. If my back touches it, my back will burn. I mean, these were games that I had to play with myself, but I really had to do it and I really had to believe it. And Kevin needs to get more into that philosophy. You can be proud of that brown belt. You could be on the cusp of getting a black belt. It doesn't change, statistically speaking. Good guys don't get submitted. They just don't get submitted from a guy on their back. The great submissions come when you're in a dominant control. You take position. You force the action. I share that with you. Feel free to argue. You'll be arguing based on things you want to say in your heart. I know that you won't argue by reconfronting me with data because data supports me.